Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
We kick things off by bringing in the head honchos at LibertyNation.com, Editor-in-Chief Leesa K. Donner, and Managing Editor Mark Angelides to help us make sense of how the world has changed just since our last show a week ago. So, Leesa, let's start with you. Is the media serving a useful purpose in all this, or are they willfully, for the sake of ratings or trying to weaken Trump, driving the panic, which led to the travel ban and these decisions by major sports organizations to take unprecedented steps to shut down their seasons and tournaments?
Well, as you're wont to say, this is not a but an and. I think both, but they are hyping it a little bit too much. And let me give you a clue about how that happens. For instance, when, as you know, I was an anchor, a reporter, and a producer in television newsrooms for over a dozen years, many moons ago. And basically, what happens is when you're running B-roll, which are the pictures that go with the person talking, if you don't have what you want, you kind of fake it a little bit. And I saw that on Fox this morning. It was really funny. They were talking about, in America, this is what's happening. You got pictures of New York, and then sandwiched in between was clearly a picture of China. And it was all these people with masks. There was a Caucasian woman in the front. So it was a good head fake. But in other words, it basically sent a message that there are people in America running around with masks on their face, which we know is not happening, at least yet.
Well, I mean, the media certainly can be accused of contributing to the panic, and, they have to concern themselves with ratings above all else, it seems like. But, Mark, let's bring you in here, Mark Angelides. How would you compare the response of the U.S., the EU, individual European nations, and, of course, ground zero for this COVID-19, China?
Hey, Tim. Well, to be honest, the American response is a very strong one, possibly a little too late, but it's certainly a strong move. Now, the EU's responded to Donald Trump's banning of flights coming in from the EU by saying that they weren't consulted. Or they didn't have any input into this, which really smacks of the core of the EU, where they expect to be involved in absolutely every decision. But if we look at around the world, you've got countries, for example, Russia, Singapore, and India, all of whom closed the borders immediately and have had very, very limited cases reported. And I don't believe there's been any deaths in those countries, and that was a good response to do. And of course, the US now has shut down from a lot of travel from a lot of places. It's very good. It's a very smart move. Unfortunately, the EU, with one of its core principles being the freedom of movement, which is beholden within the Schengen Agreement, which is open borders, what's happening is we're seeing one country after the other just have a ridiculous amount of cases because they can't control who's coming in. People are fleeing from hot spots and they're just going into another country because there are no border protections.
Let me follow up on one thing you just said. You said it was a good response by the U.S., but too late. In what sense was it too late, and what effect is that likely to have down the line?
Well, as I say, with Russia, Singapore, and India, it was quite literally as soon as they realized what was happening, that they shut the borders to areas where there are infections, and that's kept the infection rates down. Now, doing it a little bit later, like the US has done, that means that many cases have already come into the country. Now, I like to put the analogy on this that if your bath is overflowing, you turn off the tap first, and then you pull the plug. So by shutting down the travel, that's turning off the faucet. So you're not just adding more and more. Now you've just got to deal with emptying the bathwater. The bathwater being obviously the case of infection.
Okay, Leesa, now you and I have been talking over the last few days about how Americans will now be forced to hit the pause button and pull back from these big gatherings and sports events and spend more time with themselves and their families. How do you think the country will handle this most unexpected turn of events?
I was just talking to our sociocultural correspondent Lorraine Silvitz about this. She's got her MSW, and this is fascinating. You know, are we going to be sitting around playing Scrabble and cards again, sort of like it's the early 20th century, or are we headed for divorce court? You know, because now we have to stare at each other and we don't have anything to, take up our time. So I think this is going to be a fascinating. I think we're going to learn a lot about our culture and about each other. Does this mean dysfunctional families will rage dysfunctionally, or will they use this as an opportunity to kind of come together again? I think it's a fascinating sociocultural experiment. We're just at the beginning of it, so we shall see. But I do think, in a way, it might be healthy for us to have to deal with each other a little more, and rather than going to the local basketball game.
You know, Mark, I was thinking about this happening in 2020 as opposed to, say, 20 or certainly 30 years ago, where we did not have the internet. We didn't have computers. And now a lot of people can adapt to these circumstances by working from home and still being productive. I'm thinking about how awful and treacherous this would have been if it happened 30 years ago.
Yeah, very much so, Tim. I mean, really, it's the middle classes that I hate to say feel a benefit from this, but will be able to transfer their work remotely. So they'll be able to work from home or from their local Starbucks if they're brave enough to head down there. But of course, with the working class jobs, or the lower skilled jobs, the ones that are really manual labor stuff, obviously you can't put those into. You can't say go and work from home. It's not really going to happen. So a lot of those key industries will feel an after effect of this. So because people will want to start putting these into more automated systems, just in case the same thing happens again. In terms of how businesses react to it, clearly you've got the social media companies and the tech platforms. They're making a killing at the moment because so many people are just glued to their computers looking for the latest updates, or they're stuck at home. What are they going to do? They're going to go online. They're going to stream their latest box set to binge watch, or to get those old episodes of Cheers out and watch all 11 seasons.
You talked about, Mark, how the head of the EU was, sort of miffed that
Yeah.
Donald Trump didn't clear. This really goes to show the arrogance, the haughtiness. In other words, they're thinking that the U.S. president needs to kowtow to the EU and get approval and consult with them first. I just find that really appalling.
Actually, Leesa, this is really the difference between those who are globalist and those who are internationalist. The EU is very much a globalist enterprise, and they believe that everybody should, follow the rules that are set globally. But it's by them, it's by these people who are unelected, who have essentially seized power from sovereign nations. And then you've got the internationalist outlook, which is kind of I'm okay, you're okay. This is our country, and we'll work internationally, but we're our country, and that's very much the Donald Trump approach.